Hey guys, welcome back. So now getting back into Wolverine, which is very much a CIA Agent of Krakoa style series that Benjamin Percy is doing. But with it taking this route and focusing on Logan, and I'll admit a bit of the stuff that does come along with this route is a bit familiar, but at this time with Dawn of X and the nation of Krakoa, we'll actually see some of these familiar instances play out a little different, which could possibly roll into a final solution to an issue that Wolverine has run into again and again. So let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so at this point, jumping right back in and picking up after everything with Omega Red arriving to Krakoa, and though that issue was resolved, kind of, because when does Wolverine's issues ever truly go away? But after dealing with Omega Red, we go right back into the investigation of the issue with the missing drugs. But with doing so, this time we pick up a little bit with the Marauders, who at this time their ship is in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, which as it turns out is way off course. But when we see this, we quickly realize that the same thing which had happened to Wolverine, with the hallucinations and him turning on his team, with him being controlled by the Pale Girl, but in this case we actually see her take control of the Marauders in order to move their shipment of Krakoan drugs off course to another destination. And when this happens, everyone is under her influence except for Bishop, and Bishop actually catches Iceman freezing the boxes of petals, throwing them off the Marauder to a smaller ship. Then on the smaller ship, Pyro melts them and he takes them on board. And it's not even like a smaller ship, it's more like a dinghy, or a dinghy sized ship. But also aboard with them on the other ship, there's the Pale Girl. But when Bishop sees this, and he's kind of like, what's going on? And he more or less tells them that I know I ain't seeing what I thinking I'm seeing. And he calls a Storm like, Storm, come get these Marauders. But with calling for Storm's help, she attacks him, he fights back, but it only leads to him getting thrown off the ship and into the water. And once into the water, he's grabbed by Kitty Pryde and just dragged to the bottom of the ocean. And with seeing this, like, keep in mind the way that this went down, because it's going to be pretty significant once we get back to Wolverine. Because in his case, when we get a bit of a reflection back at how it actually went down, when he turned on X-Force and the illusion which he believed he had seen, with each team member being an enemy from his past, and Logan pretty much just slicing right through them, it's also here where a couple things are pointed out to us. Because one, even though at times Wolverine's memories may be fragmented, or they may only come back to him in bits and pieces, but when they do, the bits and pieces that come back, they are very vivid, which kind of makes me think of Westworld a little bit. Because on Westworld you have these hosts of these synthetic beings, which are essentially androids, and on the show they would have their memory wiped, but after some time for living so long, memories would come back, and when they did, for them, it was very much like reliving that moment. And for Logan, that's very much what we get. But in his case, we see it in the form of a dream as he's being pieced back together within the healing gardens of Krakoa. And like I mentioned, like for him, the dream feels so real to where like now you throw in the whole situation of Krakoa and everyone being able to be resurrected at any time. For a moment, it puts him in this place of like, did that really happen? Because he could have just died on an X-Force mission or had been injured on a mission and then had this crazy dream before he came back, or while he was being stitched up in the healing gardens. But when he comes back and he still sees some blood on him that's not his blood, he quickly realizes that it wasn't a dream, it did happen, and like we had seen, Wolverine was found by CIA agent Jeff Bannister, who then later just dropped Logan off at a Krakoan gate. But while here in the healing gardens, Logan also sees Bishop, who for the time being, it appears that Bishop is having the same hallucinations as Logan, although we know that he's not. And I gotta say, like, this is a pretty smart move on the Pale Girl by not controlling Bishop's mind, because now everyone is thinking that he's the only one on the Marauders who's losing it. And with him catching everyone stealing the product and throwing it overboard, it very much seemed like he lost control, attacked the team, and just threw all the drugs overboard. Which, like I said, for the Pale Girl, this could be a really good plan, or a really bad plan. We just gotta wait and see. But in the case of Jeff Bannister, who I want to call Jeff Bridges every time I see him, but in his case where he's trying to spend as much time as he can with his daughter, with her cancer being terminal, and for him it's tough because he's torn between solving this investigation and then spending as much time with his daughter as he can. But while he's with his daughter, he gets a call from Agent Millie, who pretty much lets him know that the bad situation has gotten worse, with the CIA finding more bodies of people who have been controlled. And with Jeff's daughter hearing this, she then tells him that even though he hates mutants, he should really seek out their help on this one, because it's not their fault that there's a shortage and the drugs are being stolen, and essentially they're working for the same cause. Because plain and simple, the mutants created this drug to help humanity, But also with making this point, his daughter makes him promise that he'll make the mutants help, which of course he does promise to her because he'll do anything within his power to try to save her life. But also over in the hatchery in Krakoa, you have like this huge moment, because on one hand with Wolverine, who's waiting for the X-Force team to be resurrected, but while he's there waiting, Scott just stands there watching, but he doesn't say a word. And this is pretty huge because even recently, Scott has been trying to reach out to Wolverine in spite of their long history of differences, and we'll talk more about that when we get back into the X-Men playlist. But as far as here, in this moment, when Logan tells Scott that he's gonna make it right, and more specifically talking about Jean, because they both love her. But when Scott walks away, without saying anything, like he stood there, said nothing, Logan said, I'm gonna make this right. Scott still said nothing. He walked away. And it's like, when this happens, like you can just feel the pain echo throughout Logan's soul. Because in this moment, there's no words that Scott could have said to make Logan feel worse. But after this, we go over to Jeff Bannister, who's meeting up with Agent Millie and intentionally doing so at the shooting range so no one can hear in on their conversation. Because with everything she's told him and everything he's collected, he knows that somebody is somehow getting information because they already know the routes where the petals are being moved and they're always a step ahead. But of course, with them being the CIA, they're already tapping calls and taking footage, and it's here where she shows them that she has footage of the Pale Girl, who prior to this point they've only known by name because most recently the Pale Girl took out one of their agents who was getting a little too close, and after the only words that agent could really say was Pale Girl. But at this point, with Jeff Bannister meeting Millie at the shooting range and getting more information about what happened to Agent Fink, and now also seeing a picture of the Pale Girl, he tells her to delete it all because even though it's useful, it's still very much like they're telling this Pale Girl what their next move is. So to switch things up and also honor the word he gave his daughter, it's here where he reaches back out to Wolverine. And it's here where initially in their conversation, they just have a beer and kind of get to know each other while Bannister's explaining what happened on his end, because really and truly these two don't know each other, but they do share the common goal of wanting to resolve this issue. And on Bannister's end, he lets Logan know that he's dealing with the issue of a mole, and he compares it to like a weed in the grass. You don't work through it, you don't work around it, you just kill it. But also within this conversation, Bannister also opens up a bit to Logan and he tells him about this scar that he has on his face. And with this, it gives us a bit of backstory to what his daughter was talking about with Bannister hating mutants. And though Bannister doesn't get too specific, he does let Logan know that he got this scar on his face during one of the mutant versus mutant events, which for all we know could have been a number of things. Whether something with Apocalypse, Magneto, Onslaught, Cassandra Nova, or even something smaller like Schism where it's Wolverine versus Cyclops. But now he has to look beyond that and work with the mutant in order to save his daughter's life. And after this whole speech, Logan just responds like, yeah, I'm good at killing stuff, so let's do it. And Bannister just looks at him like, dude, really? Like, did you hear anything I said? Which is funny, but we know that Wolverine is taking this way more deeper than he's expressed to Bannister in that moment. But at this point, with them moving forward with their investigation and just between the two of them, and also Millie as well, because she did bring information to Bannister. So I don't want to count out Agent Millie. But with this leading them out to the Pacific Ocean and around the same place where Bishop had more or less been framed for taking out the Marauders, but it's here where they arrive and the storms in the ocean is going ham. And it's here where Bannister's like, I know y'all know a mutant that can control the weather, like where's she at? But of course, Wolverine didn't want to bring more mutants in because he didn't want to once again slaughter his people, which is understandable, but if I was Bannister, I would have kind of gave him a side eye in that moment. But on Bannister's end, he's kind of doing the same thing, because with only bringing Millie and also furthering this investigation by keeping it off the books, this is him making his attempt on avoiding to be followed. But when Millie calls him to the bridge and tells Bannister that there's something he must take a look at, him and Logan of course come to take a look, with Bannister assuming that they're being approached or followed, but instead Molly brought him in to tell him that who they're looking for is already here, because they came to the same place where the Pale Girl used the Marauders and offloaded shipments. And because of this, the Pale Girl took over the mind of Agent Millie and also Wolverine and stabbed Jeff Bannister in the back, literally. And it's one of those things where I'll admit, like, first time reading through this, it was like, oh man, here we go again, Wolverine mind control, because we've seen this with Department H, we've seen this with Old Man Logan, we've seen this with the return of Wolverine, which are just a few examples off the top of my head. But this time around, I feel like Benjamin Percy is taking a different approach to where we'll finally see Logan benefit from this experience, which he knows all too well. And there's two things that make me say that, because one, with Logan's recent disagreements both with Domino and also with Magneto about keeping memories whether good or bad, because in a way they define who you are. And for Wolverine, be it good, bad, or indifferent, time and time again he's found that these memories have later on served the purpose of getting through whatever present situation. And having been mind controlled so many times, but also I would say suffering the most than anyone who's experienced it, like it would only make sense for this to lead into a permanent solution, which likely would come by way of Forge, that would keep this from ever happening to him again. And I wouldn't be surprised if the request that he gave Forge was something to that nature. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Real quick, just want to give a shout out to all the Patreons. Thank you guys for all of your support, and for anyone that's new that wants to support the channel, I got a link down below where you can head to patreon.com/Dopespill. But let me know you guys' thoughts down in the comments below, because for one, I'm glad that this isn't something just happening with Logan. And to be completely honest, I'm not a fan of like the mind control thing like overall, which is why I'm glad it's not the only thing going on in this series, but with it being a part of one of the threads going throughout this series, I would very much like for it to come to a resolve to where Logan figures this thing out with the help of some of the new things that the nation of c.i.a has to offer, so that we never see him deal with it again. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments below, and we'll do it again in the next one. Alright, later.